If you deal with some sort of chronic joint pain, I'm here to tell you that you can rebuild your joints and get back to the activities that you love without pain. In this video, I'm going to break down the exact framework to get out of pain and stay out of pain that I use myself and for my clients. Now, I'm not going to get into the specifics of every single joint in this video, but rather we'll be talking about the larger principles that can be applied to any joint that you're dealing with. But if you do want to watch any content about the specifics for how to deal with a joint such as your elbow or wrist or knees, check out the rest of the content on my channel, subscribe, and comment below if you're looking for something that hasn't already been posted. But I'm not going to waste any more time, and I'm going to go ahead and give you the exact framework that you can use for any joint. This is how we rebuild a joint from being in chronic pain or after an injury to being able to do the activities that you love without pain and without worry. Here's the exact framework. We rebuild the problematic joint and the surrounding joints if needed by training the fundamental movements and positions that those joints produce and progress them by increasing load and range of motion over time. This solution is not built on quick fixes, supplements, massages, adjustments, or standalone exercises that will fix all of your problems. It's ultimately built on movement that your body once could do that it no longer can. And the system is set up to help you figure out exactly what your deficiency is and figure out how to fix it without needing the experience of a doctor or a professional. So to illustrate what this framework actually looks like in practice, we're going to do a case study for someone dealing with a specific issue and talk about how they can apply this framework to identify their problem and get pain-free in the long term. So our example case study is going to be someone who took a fall 3 months ago. They landed on their wrist and they injured it. They went to a doctor. They said it was sprained. They told them to rest it for 6 to 8 weeks. They rest it. It still hurts a little bit in their day-to-day life. So they look up online some stretches to try, some exercises to try. They do some massages, start taking some pills, whatever they need. And then eventually they get to where it doesn't really hurt just from living. But whenever they try to push themselves a little bit more, carrying a heavy object, holding a frying pan, pushing off of something, that pain continues to come back. And they don't know why, and they don't know how to fix it. So let's solve this specific problem. So what most doctors and professionals would say for these types of issues is they would give you a pill, a supplement, a brace. They'd tell you to ice it or rest it or stretch it. But none of these are actually going to fix the underlying problem. The injury occurred because the demands of a particular activity or thing exceeded the joint's ability to handle it, in this case, the fall. And since the wrist was injured and very little was done about it, the ability of the wrist has actually substantially decreased. And so while it may not hurt all the time, it is going to now hurt whenever you try to increase the demand, whether it's holding heavier objects or landing on something or pushing off of something. That pain is going to keep coming back because that deficiency is still there. But if a joint is weak or has lost its ability, what does that mean and how do we actually improve that? A joint never just does one thing. And so trying to take one exercise and crown it as king for that joint is often not going to fix the problem, or the odds are at least very low. But the best way to actually assess the ability of a joint is to break it down into the movements that it's capable of. So in other words, for our specific situation, what movements and positions is the wrist primarily responsible for or involved in? Let me go ahead and walk you through all of those movements right now. The first two that you probably thought of are flexion and extension. Think of shooting a basketball or throwing a ball. The next two movements are deviation, radial deviation and ulnar deviation. Don't get too caught up in the anatomical terms here. Just think about the movement that your wrist can do as if you were waving to someone. And the last two movements that the wrist is involved in is pronation and supination. Supination is the act of turning your palms facing up, and pronation is the act of turning your palms facing down. Every movement that you complete and every force that you produce at the wrist is a combination of some of those movements. So if we become strong and resilient across all 6 movements of the wrist here, we'll become strong and resilient across all movement at the wrist. So how do we get strong and resilient in these movements? Well, that's where these exercises come in. The exercises are designed to increase the capacity of the joint through 2 levers, range of motion and load. The magic comes in for these exercises when we scale them back in load and range of motion to your exact current ability and pain-free level so that you can start making these improvements over time pain-free. So to demonstrate this, I'm going to show you the exact exercises that I use to cover all of these movements of the wrist. For the 4 movements besides pronation and supination, I actually use 2 variations of an exercise. Don't let that overwhelm you. The simple reason for why I do that is to make sure that the entire range of motion is covered for these exercises. The positioning of the dumbbell is super important in terms of how much force the muscles and joint have to produce in certain positions. So using 2 variations of an exercise at different ranges of motion ensures that we're covering all of our bases. First, we're going to cover our wrist flexion exercises. So for our grip, we're going to put our palm against the outside of this dumbbell, holding it like this. We're going to start with our forearm parallel to the ground, holding the weight up like this, and controlling this dumbbell on the way down, pulling up like this. So we're loading this flexion. And then for our second variation, we do the same thing, but just with our arm pointing down at the ground. So it's the same movement, but for one of them, this position is hard here, not hard here. And then this position is hard here, not hard here. For wrist extension, the grip that we're going to take is we are going to split our index and middle finger, and we're going to put that right between the dumbbell handle like this. We're going to grip the dumbbell just like that. And for our lengthened position, I'm going to prop my forearm up about 45 degrees. You can hold on to your forearm for stability, and then controlling this on the way down, pulling the weight up just like this. And then for our other variation, now we're going to go with forearm parallel to the ground. So this position is hardest when the wrist is neutral. This one is hardest when the wrist is flexed. For our radial deviation, or pulling our wrist this way, thumb towards me, I'm going to start by holding the dumbbell like this, as if I were holding out a frying pan out in front of me. I'm going to put my forearm slightly above, parallel to the ground. I'm going to let that weight drop into a full stretch, and then I'm pulling that weight up to vertical like this. And then for our other variation, we can just slightly adjust the grip so that we're holding it completely gripping it like this, putting our arm down towards the ground, and just trying to pull that weight up to the side, just like that. For our ulnar deviation, or pulling pinky side, I'm going to first grip the dumbbell handle in between my 4th and 5th finger like this. And I'm going to bring my arm up like this so that this outside of my wrist is pointing up to the sky. You can hold on to your wrist for stability, or you can prop yourself down, whatever feels comfortable. And then from here, I'm pulling the weight up to vertical like this. And then for the other position, we're going to switch to that grip like we did for the other one, but just on the opposite side of the dumbbell. Same idea, forearm pointed straight down, and we're pulling that weight up to the side. All right, and for covering pronation and supination, I'm going to use a broomstick here. And the way that this is going to work is I'm going to hold the broom in a position like this with my elbow by my side, and I'm going to be rotating this broom both directions like this, controlling it on the way down. So we're covering both pronation and supination in one movement. And the way that we can progress this is by changing our hand position. So the farther out to one side, the more offset it's going to be, so the more load it's going to be using, keeping it controlled just like that. So that was all the exercises that cover the wrist joint. Here's how we apply them. We take our case study who's dealing with wrist pain, and we put them through all of these exercises and figure out what level they can currently do the exercises that is completely pain-free, both in load and range of motion. Odds are we will find weakness across most, if not all, of these exercises. But what also is very likely is that you'll see a significant weakness in one or two of these movements. That's a really good sign that there's a specific weak link in the chain that's happening that needs to be addressed and prioritized. So these exercises in and of themselves prescribe the problem. You don't need a doctor or a physical therapist to give you a masterclass on the anatomy of a certain joint or telling you which muscle isn't firing the way it's supposed to, or to give you some really long, complicated Latin name to describe your specific problem. The exercises themselves show you exactly what's missing, and they provide the path forward for you to fill the gap. So once we start doing these exercises, how do we progress them over time? Well, like I said earlier, we progress these through load and through range of motion. So in this specific situation, the way we would do that is changing the weight of the dumbbell that the client is using, and also changing how deep of a position that they get into for all of these exercises. And from there, we can build standards that the client tries to achieve, such as reaching a certain weight for a certain number of reps for each exercise. And the idea there being that once you have completed an exercise at a certain load for a certain range of motion for a certain number of reps, that implies that you have a certain amount of function that's needed to get through your life pain-free. And those standards can be changed depending on who you're talking to. The amount of ability that an MMA fighter is going to need at their wrist is going to be a lot higher than someone who works a desk job. I hope now that you can see how much clarity and simplicity that this framework gives you when you're looking at joint pain. There's no guesswork. There's a clear end goal. There's objective and measurable improvements over time. And the entire time through, it's pain-free and it feels good. This is the same framework that got me from being sidelined in basketball to be dunking without pain, and now continuing to rebuild all the joints across my body that have given me issues for years. While these general principles are gold for all of the joints across your body and can be applied wherever you are at whatever level, I know that practical solutions are also really valuable to you, probably in your specific situation. So check out the rest of my content and stay tuned for future videos where I break this stuff down on a joint by joint level. If you found this video helpful, send this to someone who you think needs to hear this. Thank y'all for watching, and comment below if you have any questions.